The airport terminal buzzed with chaos. But for Ethan Caldwell and Lucas Rivera, the world shrank to the space between their interlocked fingers. A single glance from a flight attendant, sharp as a blade, had turned their excited chatter into a public spectacle. By the time they were escorted off Flight 214, the sting of humiliation burned hotter than the Miami sun outside. Ethan's jaw clenched as he gripped Lucas's hand, his knuckles whitening. They stood in the gate area, surrounded by curious stares, the kind that made you feel like a zoo exhibit. Lucas, ever the optimist, squeezed back, his warm brown eyes whispering, "We'll get through this." Their crime? A fleeting kiss on the cheek and a shared laugh over a bad in-flight movie trailer. Apparently, that was enough for the crew to label them disruptive. Ethan's voice trembled with rage as he faced the gate agent. "You're kicking us off for what?" "For being ourselves." The agent, a wiry man with a name tag reading Greg, avoided eye contact. "Sir, you're making other passengers uncomfortable. We have a policy." "Uncomfortable?" Lucas cut in, his voice steady but laced with hurt. "We were just existing. You don't get to police how we love each other." Greg's lips thinned, but he gestured toward security. "You need to leave the gate area now." Ethan felt the weight of every stare, every whisper. He wanted to scream, to demand justice right there in the terminal, but Lucas tugged him gently toward the exit. "Not here, Ethan. Not like this." As they stepped into the humid Miami evening, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was his father, Richard Caldwell, a civil rights attorney with a reputation for tearing down giants. "Stay put." Richard's voice crackled through the speaker. "I'm on my way." Ethan and Lucas had met 2 years ago in a crowded New York City bookstore, bonding over a dog-eared copy of Giovanni's Room. Ethan, a graphic designer with a sharp wit and a guarded heart, was drawn to Lucas's warmth, a photographer whose lens captured beauty in the mundane. They'd build a life together in Brooklyn, navigating the world as a queer couple with dreams of a future unmarred by judgment. But judgment followed them. It always did. Richard arrived within the hour, his silver hair catching the fluorescent lights as he strode through the terminal. At 62, he carried the weight of decades fighting for justice, from racial discrimination cases to landmark LGBTQ plus rights battles. His presence was a force, and Ethan felt a flicker of hope. "What happened?" Richard asked, his voice calm but commanding. Ethan recounted the incident, his words tumbling out with raw emotion. Lucas added details, his voice softer but no less resolute. The flight attendant's sneer, the captain's curt announcement, the humiliating walk through the aisle as passengers gawked. It was a story Richard had heard too many times, in too many forms. "They can't do this," Richard said, his eyes narrowing. "They won't get away with it." By morning, the story had spread. A passenger's shaky video of Ethan and Lucas being escorted off the plane went viral on X, sparking outrage. Hashtags like "Justice for Ethan and Lucas" trended, and Richard was already drafting a lawsuit against Horizon Airlines. "We're not just fighting for us," Lucas said as they sat in Richard's hotel room, papers strewn across the table. "This is for everyone who's been shamed for who they are." Ethan nodded, but his heart was heavy. He'd always been the fighter, the one to push back, but this felt bigger than him. It was bigger than them both. Richard looked up from his laptop. "This airline has a history of brushing off complaints like yours, but they've never faced me." The next week was a whirlwind. Richard filed the lawsuit in federal court, alleging discrimination based on sexual orientation. The case drew attention from advocacy groups, and soon, Ethan and Lucas were invited to speak at a rally outside Horizon's Miami headquarters. The crowd was a sea of rainbow flags and handmade signs. Ethan stood at the podium, his voice shaking at first but growing stronger. "We didn't ask for this fight," he said, "but we're here now, and we're not backing down." Lucas stood beside him, his hand finding Ethan's. The crowd roared, and for a moment, the weight of the world lifted. But the airline wasn't silent. Horizon issued a statement claiming the removal was due to disruptive behavior. not discrimination. The lie stung, but Richard was prepared. He'd already secured witness statement from passengers who contradicted the airline story, including a mother who'd been seated behind Ethan and Lucas. They were just being themselves, she told a local news outlet. The crew overreacted. It was heartbreaking to watch. As the legal battle loomed, Ethan and Lucas leaned on each other. Late nights were spent talking about their dreams. Lucas's hope to open a photography studio, Ethan's desire to design inclusive spaces for queer youth. But the stress was relentless. Ethan woke up to hate messages online, and Lucas's camera sat untouched, his creativity stifled by the spotlight. One evening, as they sat on their Brooklyn rooftop, Lucas broke the silence. "Do you ever wish we could just disappear? Start over somewhere else?" Ethan looked at him, the city skyline glittering behind them. "Sometimes, but then I think about all the kids out there, scared to hold hands in public. If we don't fight, who will?" Lucas smiled, his eyes glistening. "You're right. We're in this together." They kissed under the stars, a quiet act of defiance. The lawsuit gained traction, but so did the backlash. Horizon's legal team dug into Ethan and Lucas's past, trying to paint them as troublemakers. They even leaked a photo of the couple at a pride parade, spinning it as evidence of provocative behavior. Richard was furious, but he urged patience. "This is what they do," he said. "They'll try to break you. Don't let them." Ethan and Lucas held firm, but the pressure was mounting. They needed a win, not just for themselves, but for everyone watching. The Miami courthouse loomed like a fortress, its stone facade cold against the humid air. Ethan and Lucas sat in the front row, their hands clasped tightly as Richard faced the judge. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, activists, and curious onlookers filled every seat, their murmurs a low hum of anticipation. Richard's opening statement was a masterclass in controlled fury. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady, "my clients, my son, Ethan Caldwell, and his partner, Lucas Rivera, were removed from Horizon Airlines Flight 214 for one reason. They dared to love openly. This is not about disruption. This is about discrimination." The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, leaned forward. Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she'd see through Horizon's lies. The airline's lawyer, a slick man named Carter Hayes, countered with a polished narrative. The plaintiffs were asked to leave due to complaints from multiple passengers about their behavior, he said, his tone dripping with false sympathy. This was a matter of maintaining a comfortable environment for all. Ethan's blood boiled. He wanted to stand and shout that the only discomfort was the crew's bigotry, but Lucas's gentle touch on his arm kept him grounded. The first witness was the mother from the plane, Maria Gonzalez. She took the stand, her voice trembling but resolute. "I was seated behind them," she said. "They were laughing, holding hands, nothing inappropriate. The flight attendant seemed offended by them. It wasn't right." Her testimony was a lifeline, but Horizon's team was relentless. They cross-examined her, twisting her words to suggest she hadn't seen everything. Maria held her ground, but Ethan could see the toll it took. Next came the flight attendant, a woman named Karen Walsh. She claimed Ethan and Lucas had been loud and demonstrative, causing a disturbance. Richard dismantled her story with precision, presenting timestamps from the viral video that showed the couple quietly seated. "Ms. Walsh," Richard said, his voice cutting, "can you explain why you reported a kiss on the cheek as disruptive when you ignored a passenger spilling coffee 2 rows ahead?" Karen faltered, her face reddening. The courtroom buzzed. Outside, the rally grew louder. Supporters chanted Ethan and Lucas's names, their voices carrying through the courthouse walls. But so did the counter-protesters, a small but vocal group waving signs about family values. Ethan tried to tune them out, but each slur felt like a needle in his skin. After court, the trio retreated to a quiet diner. Richard sipped his coffee, his face etched with determination. "We're making progress," he said, "but they'll fight dirty. Be ready." Lucas stared at his untouched sandwich. "I just want this to be over," he whispered. "I want to feel safe again." Ethan reached for his hand. "We will. I promise." But promises felt fragile. That night, Lucas woke from a nightmare, his breath ragged. Ethan held him, whispering reassurances, but the fear lingered. The world was watching, and not all of it was kind. The next day brought a surprise. A whistleblower from Horizon Airlines. A young gate agent, Jamal Carter, contacted Richard with internal emails. They revealed a pattern of bias. Crew members were trained to flag unusual behavior, a vague term often used to target queer passengers. Jamal had seen it happen before and couldn't stay silent. "This changes everything," Richard said, his eyes gleaming. "We've got proof of systemic discrimination." The emails were a bombshell, but presenting them in court was tricky. Horizon's legal team argued they were inadmissible, claiming Jamal had violated company policy. The judge allowed them, but the battle was far from won. Ethan and Lucas took the stand the following week. Ethan went first, his voice steady despite his nerves. He spoke of their love, their dreams, and the pain of being treated like criminals for existing. "We weren't disrupting anything," he said. "We were just living." Lucas followed, his warmth shining through. "I grew up in a small town where I hid who I was," he said. "I thought things would be different here. But that day on the plane, it made me feel small again." The courtroom was silent, the weight of their words hanging in the air. Even Carter Hayes looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. But Horizon wasn't done. They called a passenger who claimed Ethan and Lucas had been overly affectionate, painting a distorted picture. Richard tore into the witness, exposing inconsistencies, but the damage was done. Doubt lingered in the jury's eyes. As the trial stretched on, Ethan and Lucas found solace in small moments. They cooked together, danced to old records, and planned a future beyond the courtroom. But the stress was a shadow, always lurking. One night, Lucas found Ethan staring at his laptop, reading hateful comments online. "Don't do this to yourself," Lucas said, closing the screen. "They don't know us." Ethan's eyes were red. "I just want to protect you. I hate that this is our life now." Lucas pulled him close. "You are my life. That's enough." The trial's turning point came when Jamal took the stand. His testimony was electric, detailing how Horizon's policies enabled bias. "I saw it happen to others," he said. "Couples, trans folks, anyone who didn't fit their mold. It wasn't about disruption. It was about control." The jury leaned forward, and Ethan felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could win this. The courtroom felt smaller each day, its walls closing in as the trial entered its third week. Ethan sat rigid, his fingers tracing the edge of Lucas's hand onto the table. The jury's faces were unreadable, a mosaic of skepticism and sympathy that made Ethan's stomach churn. Jamal's testimony had shifted the tide, but Horizon's legal team was relentless. Carter Hayes painted Jamal as a disgruntled employee, spinning his courage into betrayal. Mr. Carter had a history of disciplinary issues, Hayes said, holding up a file. His claims are unreliable. Richard countered with a ferocity Ethan had rarely seen. He presented Jamal's performance reviews, which glowed with praise, and emails from colleagues commending his integrity. "This young man risked his career to tell the truth," Richard said. "Horizon wants you to believe he's a liar because they can't face their own failures." The judge's gavel fell, silencing the room. Ethan glanced at Lucas, whose eyes were fixed on Richard. There was pride there, but also fear. They both knew the stakes were higher than ever. Outside, the media frenzy grew. News vans lined the street, and reporters hounded Ethan and Lucas as they left the courthouse. One shouted, "Do you think this lawsuit is tearing families apart?" Ethan froze, his fists clenching, but Lucas stepped forward. "We're fighting for families like ours," Lucas said, his voice calm but firm. "Love doesn't tear people apart. Hate does." The clip went viral, and support poured in. Messages from queer youth across the country flooded their inboxes, thanking them for standing up. But so did the threats. Ethan stopped checking his phone, but Lucas read every message, determined to find hope in the noise. One evening, they visited Maria Gonzalez, the passenger who testified. She welcomed them into her Miami home, where her kids ran around, oblivious to the weight of the moment. "I couldn't stay quiet," Maria said, pouring coffee. "I have a son. He's only 10, but if he grows up to love whoever he loves, I want him to feel safe." Ethan's throat tightened. "Thank you," he managed. "You didn't have to do this." Maria smiled. "Yes, I did." The trial resumed with a new witness, a former Horizon executive who'd left the company after clashing with its leadership. She testified about a culture of intolerance, where complaints about queer passengers were swept under the rug. It wasn't policy on paper, she said, but it was understood. Her words were a gut punch to Horizon's defense. Richard seized the moment, presenting data on similar incidents across the airline's routes. The jury's attention sharpened, and Ethan dared to hope. But hope was fragile. That night, someone slashed the tires of Richard's rental car. The police called it vandalism, but Ethan knew better. It was a warning. "We can't stop," Richard said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion in his eyes. "They're scared because we're winning." Lucas, usually the calm one, snapped. "Winning? We're being targeted. Richard, this isn't just a courtroom fight anymore." Ethan pulled Lucas into a hug, feeling his tremble. "We're not alone," he whispered. "We have each other." The next day, Richard called a surprise witness, a pilot who'd flown with Horizon for a decade. Captain Elena Torres took the stand, her uniform crisp, her gaze unflinching. "I was on a flight last year where a queer couple was removed for no reason," she said. "I reported it, but nothing happened. It's why I'm here." Her testimony was a turning point. The jury whispered, and even Hayes looked rattled. Richard pressed the advantage, submitting Elena's report, which Horizon had buried. As the trial neared its end, Ethan and Lucas prepared to speak again. This time, it was closing statements, and they wanted the jury to hear their hearts. Ethan went first, his voice raw. "We're not here for money," he said. "We're here so no one else has to feel like they don't belong." Lucas followed, his words soft but piercing. "Love is never wrong. Judging it is." The jury deliberated for 3 days. Ethan and Lucas spent them in limbo, alternating between hope and dread. They walked along Miami's beaches, the ocean's rhythm a small comfort. Lucas snapped photos, his first in weeks, capturing Ethan against the sunset. "It's not over yet," Lucas said, lowering his camera. "But we're still us." Ethan smiled, pulling him close. "Always." When the verdict came, the courtroom was electric. The judge read the decision. Horizon Airlines was found liable for discrimination. Compensatory damages were awarded, but more importantly, the airline was ordered to revise its policies and train its staff on inclusivity. Ethan's eyes burned with tears as he hugged Lucas. Richard stood beside them, his stoic facade cracking into a proud smile. The crowd outside erupted in cheers, rainbow flags waving like a sea of hope. But the fight wasn't over. Horizon announced an appeal, and the threats continued. Ethan and Lucas knew the road ahead would be long, but they also knew they weren't alone. The verdict was a victory, but it felt like a fragile one. Ethan and Lucas returned to Brooklyn, their apartment a sanctuary after weeks in Miami spotlight. The city's hum was familiar, but the weight of the trial lingered like a bruise. Horizon's appeal loomed, and Richard was already preparing. "They'll drag this out," he warned over dinner at their favorite diner. "But we've got momentum. The public's on our side." Ethan poked at his fries, his appetite gone. "The public's loud, but so are the haters. I saw another death threat on X this morning." Lucas's fork froze. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't want to worry you," Ethan said, his voice low. Richard's jaw tightened. "I'm hiring security. You're not facing this alone." The security detail was discreet but constant, a reminder that their fight had made them targets. Ethan hated it. The loss of normalcy, the constant looking over their shoulders. Lucas tried to keep things light, dragging Ethan to art galleries and street markets, but even his optimism was fraying. One afternoon, they stumbled across a queer youth group hosting a fundraiser in Prospect Park. The organizer, a trans teen named Riley, recognized them. "You're Ethan and Lucas, right?" Riley asked, eyes wide. "Your story, it's why I'm out to my parents now." Ethan's throat closed up. Lucas stepped in, his smile genuine. "That means everything," he said. "Keep being you." Riley handed them a bracelet woven with rainbow threads. "For luck," they said. Back home, Ethan slipped the bracelet onto Lucas's wrist. "This is why we're doing this," he said. "For kids like Riley." Lucas nodded, but his eyes were distant. "I just wish it didn't hurt so much." The appeal hearing was set for 3 months later, giving them a brief reprieve. Richard used the time to gather more evidence, including statements from other airlines with better inclusivity practices. Ethan and Lucas focused on rebuilding their lives, but the spotlight followed. They were invited to speak at conferences, their faces plastered on news sites. One evening, a producer reached out about a documentary. "Your story could change lives," she said. Ethan was skeptical, but Lucas saw potential. "If it helps one person feel less alone, it's worth it," he argued. They agreed, and filming began. The crew followed them through Brooklyn, capturing their love in quiet moments, cooking dinner, laughing over bad TV, stealing kisses on the subway. But they also filmed the hard parts. Ethan's sleepless nights, Lucas's panic attacks when hate mail arrived. The documentary aired just before the appeal hearing, amplifying their story. Viewers flooded X with support, and donations poured into queer advocacy groups. But Horizon doubled down, hiring a PR firm to spin a narrative. They painted Ethan and Lucas as opportunists, claiming the lawsuit was a publicity stunt. Richard was unfazed. "They're desperate," he said. "We've got the truth." The appeal hearing was in a federal courthouse in New York, a homecoming of sorts. Ethan felt stronger here, surrounded by their city. Lucas, though, was nervous, his camera untouched for days. "What if we lose?" he asked one night, his voice small. Ethan pulled him close. "Then we keep fighting together." The hearing was grueling. Horizon's lawyers argued the verdict was based on emotional manipulation, not evidence. Richard countered with the whistleblower emails and witness testimonies, painting a clear picture of systemic bias. The judge, a stern older man, listened intently but gave little away. Afterward, Ethan and Lucas escaped to Coney Island, needing a break from the chaos. They rode the Ferris wheel, the ocean stretching endlessly below. Lucas leaned against Ethan, his scarf fluttering in the wind. "No matter what happens," he said, "I'm glad it's you and me." Ethan kissed his forehead. "Always." The ruling came faster than expected. The appeal was denied. Horizon's policies were deemed discriminatory, and the original verdict stood. The airline was ordered to implement changes within 6 months, under court supervision. Ethan and Lucas celebrated quietly, just the two of them and Richard, toasting with cheap wine in their apartment. "This is just the beginning," Richard said. "You've started something bigger than yourselves." But the victory was bittersweet. Horizon stock dipped, and layoffs followed, sparking backlash from employees who blamed Ethan and Lucas. The couple faced a new wave of online hate, accusing them of ruining lives. Lucas took it hard. "Did we do the right thing?" he asked one night, his voice breaking. Ethan held him tightly. "We did what we had to. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary." The months after the appeal were a strange limbo. Ethan and Lucas tried to reclaim their routines, but normalcy felt like a distant memory. The documentary had made them symbols, their faces synonymous with a movement they hadn't planned to lead. Ethan threw himself into work, designing posters for queer advocacy groups. Lucas started photographing again, capturing the resilience of their community, drag queens at Pride, teens at support groups, couples holding hands in defiance. But the hate mail kept coming, a reminder that their victory hadn't changed every heart. Richard, meanwhile, was relentless. He worked with advocacy groups to monitor Horizon's compliance, ensuring the airline followed through on its court-ordered changes. Training programs were rolled out, and a new inclusivity officer was hired. But whispers of resistance lingered. Some employees resented the overhaul, and anonymous posts on X claimed the changes were forced. One afternoon, Ethan and Lucas were invited to a queer youth center in the Bronx. The kids there, many of whom had faced rejection at home, treated them like heroes. A shy teen named Amara approached, clutching a sketchbook. "I drew you," she said, revealing a vibrant portrait of Ethan and Lucas, their hands entwined against a rainbow backdrop. Ethan's eyes stung. "This is incredible," he said, pulling her into a hug. Amara smiled. "You make me feel like I can be myself." That moment became their anchor. When the hate felt overwhelming, they thought of Amara, Riley, and the countless others who saw hope in their fight. But the backlash wasn't just online. One night, their apartment was vandalized, the word "fag" scrawled across the door in red paint. Ethan's hands shook as he scrubbed it off, Lucas silent beside him. The police took a report, but no arrests were made. Richard insisted they move temporarily to his Manhattan apartment. "It's not safe," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. "I should have seen this coming." "It's not your fault," Lucas said. "We knew this would be hard." The move was a blow, but it brought them closer to Richard. Over late-night talks, Ethan learned more about his father's own battles, cases he'd lost, clients he'd failed to protect. "You don't win every fight," Richard said, "but you keep going, for the ones who can't." Inspired, Ethan and Lucas started a blog, sharing their story and amplifying others' voices. They posted about queer couples facing discrimination, trans teens fighting for their rights, and allies standing up. The blog gained traction, becoming a platform for change. One post went viral, a letter from Horizon flight attendant who'd attended the new training. "I was wrong," she wrote. "I saw Ethan and Lucas as other instead of people. I'm learning, and I'm sorry." The apology was small but seismic. Lucas framed it, hanging it in their temporary bedroom. "Progress," he said, smiling for the first time in days. But progress was uneven. Horizon's changes were slow, and some employees resisted. A leaked memo revealed managers downplaying the training, calling it PR nonsense. Richard was furious, filing a motion to hold the airline in contempt. The court hearing was tense. The judge, unimpressed with Horizon's half measures, issued a warning: comply fully or face steeper penalties. Ethan and Lucas watched from the gallery, their hands clasped. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Back in Brooklyn, they returned to their apartment, the door repainted, the scars hidden but not gone. Lucas suggested a housewarming of sorts, inviting friends and allies. The night was filled with laughter, music, and stories of resilience. Maria Gonzalez came, bringing her son, who shyly showed them his own rainbow bracelet. As the party wound down, Ethan and Lucas stood on their rooftop, the city sprawling below. "We're still here," Ethan said, his voice soft. "After everything." Lucas leaned against him. "And we're not done." The next morning, they woke to news. Horizon CEO had resigned, citing personal reasons. Insiders hinted the lawsuit had shaken the board. A new CEO was appointed, a woman with a track record of inclusivity. Richard called, his voice lighter than usual. "This is what change looks like," he said. "It's messy, but it's real." Ethan and Lucas knew the fight wasn't over, but they felt a shift. They were no longer just victims, they were catalysts. The new CEO, Dr. Anita Patel, was a game-changer. Her first act was a public apology, broadcast live on national news. Horizon Airlines failed Ethan Caldwell and Lucas Rivera, she said, her voice unwavering. "We failed our passengers and our values. That changes now." Ethan and Lucas watched from their apartment, stunned. The apology wasn't just words. It came with a commitment to partner with LGBTQ+ organizations and overhaul training from the ground up. For the first time, Ethan felt the airline might actually change. But trust was hard-won. They accepted an invitation to meet Dr. Patel, wary but curious. The meeting was in Horizon's New York office, a sleek space that felt worlds away from the cramped plane where their fight began. Dr. Patel was warm but direct. "I can't undo what happened," she said. "But I want your input. Help us get this right." Lucas hesitated, then spoke. "It's not just about training. It's about culture. People need to see us as human, not as a problem." Ethan nodded. "And it's not just us. There are others out there, scared to travel, scared to be themselves." Dr. Patel listened, taking notes. By the end, she offered them a role as consultants to ensure the changes stuck. They agreed, not for the money, but for the chance to shape a better future. The work was grueling. They reviewed training materials, sat in on sessions, and met with employees, some of whom were resistant. One pilot admitted he'd never worked with openly queer colleagues. "I didn't get it," he said, "but I'm trying." That honesty, however small, was progress. Ethan and Lucas saw it in the new manuals, which emphasized respect over control, and in the stories of passengers who felt safer flying Horizon. But the world outside was still divided. Their blog grew, but so did the trolls. One night, a brick shattered their window. A note attached: "Stop pushing your agenda." Ethan's hands shook as he called the police, but Lucas was eerily calm, taping cardboard over the broken glass. "We can't let them win," Lucas said, his voice steady. "Not now." Richard doubled their security, his face etched with worry. "I'm proud of you," he told them, "but I'm scared for you." Ethan hugged him, a rare moment of vulnerability. "We're scared too, but we're not stopping." The documentary's release brought a new wave of attention. It won awards, and Ethan and Lucas were invited to screenings across the country. At one in San Francisco, a young man approached them, tears in his eyes. "I came out because of you," he said. "I saw your story and realized I could be brave." Those moments kept them going. They started a foundation, using settlement funds to support queer youth facing discrimination. Horizon's changes began to show. Passengers shared stories of kinder crew members, and complaints about bias dropped. But Ethan and Lucas knew one airline wasn't the world. Other carriers, other industries still lagged behind. One evening, they sat with Richard, planning their next steps. "We could take this national," Richard said. "Push for federal regulations on airline inclusivity." Lucas looked at Ethan, a spark in his eyes. "What do you think?" Ethan smiled. "Let's do it." The fight was far from over, but it was theirs. They'd turned pain into purpose, and they weren't alone anymore. 2 years after the trial, Ethan and Lucas stood on a stage in Washington, D.C., addressing a crowd of activists, lawmakers, and allies. Their foundation had grown, funding shelters, scholarships, and legal aid for queer youth. Today, they were celebrating a new federal guideline, inspired by their case, mandating inclusivity training for all U.S. airlines. Ethan's voice carried over the crowd. "We didn't start this fight for us," he said. "We started it for every person who's been told their love is wrong." Lucas stood beside him, his camera around his neck, capturing the sea of faces. "We're here because love is worth fighting for," he said, "and we'll keep fighting." The crowd roared, and Richard, in the front row, wiped away a tear. He'd retired from his law practice, passing the torch to a new generation, but he remained their biggest supporter. Backstage, Ethan and Lucas shared a quiet moment. The journey had been brutal: hate mail, vandalism, sleepless nights, but it had also been beautiful. They'd married in a small ceremony in Brooklyn, surrounded by friends, family, and the kids they'd inspired. Amara had designed their invitations, her art a vibrant testament to their love. As they walked through D.C., hand in hand, Lucas stopped to snap a photo of Ethan against the Lincoln Memorial. "You're my hero," he said, lowering the camera. Ethan laughed, pulling him close. "You're mine." Their fight had changed the world, one flight at a time. Horizon Airlines was now a model for inclusivity, and other carriers followed suit. The threats hadn't stopped, but they were fewer, drowned out by a chorus of support. At home, their apartment was filled with mementos: Amara's drawing, Riley's bracelet, letters from strangers who'd found courage in their story. They'd built a life not just of love, but of purpose. One night, as they lay in bed, Lucas turned to Ethan. "Do you think we did enough?" Ethan kissed his forehead. "We did more than we ever imagined. And we're not done." The stars outside their window shone bright, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could break through. Their love had grounded an airline, sparked a movement, and given hope to countless others. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough for now.